everybody, I'm Cassandra Donnelly from Creative Passages, and I'm here in my art studio, and I would like to show you what I've been up to lately. I have a big pile of artwork here from October 23rd to November 6th, 2024, and included in this pile is two artworks that my granddaughter Lila did, who is 10 years old, soon to be 11. So we made art together. We had like an art day on Halloween. So I want to show you that as well. So I have this grouped according to category and also according to date. So this past time period, which is really like 12 days, I've been working on oil pastel drawings, collages, 2 trauma journal entries, and a lot of gel prints and decorative papers. And I did some experimentation with string gel and cold wax, which was very new for me. I did a lot of mark making, and I used a lot of distress oxide sprays in my decorative papers. So stick around, I'm going to show you this. So I'm going to start with my oil pastel drawings. And I'm going to follow this live presentation with a slideshow where you can see the scans of the artwork where I increase the contrast, and it might be higher quality, plus it'll be still and you'll be able to look at it. Well, each one will be about 5 seconds. So this is my first oil pastel drawing, and I categorize this as emotional landscape drawing. So my oil pastel drawings, my collages, and my Sharpie drawings will be emotional landscape drawings. So this one I made on 10/26 and I finished on 10/28, and I don't have a title for this one, but I like it. What stands out to me is this little star-like shape right here. So also I made this one on 11/4. This is my second oil pastel drawing, which a lot of my collages I start off as oil pastel drawings, and I considered adding some collage materials to this one, but then I kind of, well, I didn't love it, but to me it felt like it was finished and like it didn't need anything else, and that's pretty rare for me to feel settled so soon, especially without adding the collage. This one is also not titled because I make so much art. If I can't think of a title, I will then title it according to the date, which will be like, for instance, this one will be 2024 11/04.24. And then if I made several that day, which I did, it'll be like 01. I also made this collage here on, which I finished on October 29th, 2024, except for adding this little piece of like a leaf shape right here to sort of match these leaf shapes, because this space looked really empty. So I really like this one. This one turned out really nice, I think. And then also on October 30th, I made this orange looking one right here. And this is on orange cardstock. This is on black cardstock. I forgot to tell you, these first two ones were on just, well, this one's on watercolor paper and this one's on purple cardstock. Okay, so this particular oil pastel drawing and collage has a lot of sgraffito. So what I do for a lot of my artwork, not all of them, but a lot of them, is I do 2 layers of oil pastels with contrasting colors. Usually it'll be a lighter color with a darker color on top, but sometimes I'll have a darker color on the bottom and a lighter opaque color on top, because it has to be an opaque color on top for this to work. And then I will scratch into it. I use an old Sharpie that doesn't work anymore, and I scratch a design into the oil pastel. So for this particular one, and I'm holding it upside down, I sort of created these sections, and I did different designs in each of the sections. Then I got a little tired with that technique with the old Sharpie that doesn't work anymore. And so I thought, what if I try to use a stencil and I put it underneath the watercolor paper? What will happen? So I used the back of a paintbrush, the soft, or the rounded end rather, and I scratched into it. I don't know if you can actually see where I did that, but I'm trying to find some places where I did that. Unfortunately, it seems like I covered up a lot of it. Maybe right here you can see where I used a stencil, and it actually worked pretty well to do that. But then I covered a lot of the sections with the tissue paper because, I don't know, it just seemed like it needed a little bit more. So, but each of these sections actually had a scratch technique, and I used the stencils for at least 4 or 5 of the sections. And I just put the collage materials in it to make it a little bit more interesting. So next we have 2 more that I did on November 6th, and these are just regular oil pastel drawings and collages where I did a little sgraffito, I think pretty much with my fingernail. Usually I start these at work, and I'm showing the group members who are there for psychiatric reasons how to do a collage and how to scrape into the oil pastels. So of course I can't give them anything sharp, so we'll just use our fingernails to scratch into it. And then this one also was made the same way, also on November 6th. This was the second one that I did that day, and none of those have titles. So now I want to get into the Sharpie drawings. So this is a Sharpie drawing that I made on 10/31, so Halloween day. This particular drawing I did with my granddaughter Lila, who's 10, almost 11. Well, in like a week and a half she'll be 11. So I did the outline and the doodle. I do a lot of these doodles, and I have done them for a long time, and then she filled it in with me. So she did, the first thing she filled in, it goes this way, was these checkers right here. She filled in that, and she also filled in these little shapes right here in these little arch like shapes. I drew the arches, and she put the little figures inside the arches. And then she also drew these little slashes, which look like, well, she made these shapes to look like roads. So that was kind of cool. She learned about Zentangles in school, and she also filled in the negative space for these cross-like shapes I drew. And she also drew a little heart right here. She made this little line into a heart. It looks like a divided heart. And oh, she also drew this squiggle line right here to match my squiggle line, and she may have drawn a few more things on here, but she was able to kind of mimic my style, so it's kind of hard to tell like what I did and what she did because it blends together seamlessly. So I was really amazed. She does a lot of art, and she's very artistic, and she mostly does like anime, and she draws people, and she draws animals, and she's really good at that. And for a while she was into making puppets too. She also did this one on her own, which is new for her because she typically doesn't draw like abstract. And honestly, I think she's a better drawer than me. She's very talented, but she doesn't do abstract a whole lot. But she did this one, which I think is really cool. So she did that on the same day. We were having an art day together. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoy being able to have an art day with my granddaughter. And speaking of which, she also created this. This was a mixed media piece that she made. I won't say it's her very first because she did make some, but it's her very first maybe completed one. As in the past, she didn't really like do the background, but she used some of my Distress Oxide inks, and she sprayed the back there, and then she got into my butterflies and my flowers and some other shapes. I picked this heart out. Well, I thought she might be interested in it when she was, and she added some buttons as well and some other fabric shape / paper, and like here and in here too. So I think this one turned out really well. She did that one as well. And then that was pretty much it for our art day together. And then later on, oh no, this is a different day. This is November 1st. I made this one. And this one is called Disparate Parts. I actually titled this one, it actually goes this way. And so this was another Sharpie drawing, and this was sort of in response to therapy, although it wasn't really immediately afterwards or the same day, I don't think. And really this represents just the different parts of myself or my life that doesn't feel like it fits together very well. And so maybe the parts are like separated, or it could represent my trauma memories. So that's why I titled this one Disparate Parts. Normally I like to have like these doodles sort of all connected together in some way, but this one has all kinds of parts that look like they go together, but they're not exactly connected. So now I'm going to go into some of my trauma journal work. So I'm going to put a trigger warning on this video just in case, because I don't want anybody to get upset. But I'm not going to tell you my memories. I'm just going to tell you the subject matter, and it's possible the subject matter will be upsetting for some of you, maybe. So for this first one, I made, well, this took more than one day. Make sure I'm holding this right. And let me show you here. What you see on the top of this is self-leveling gel. And I actually made a video of this, and this other one I'm going to show you also made a video of it, but there's just one problem with my videos. And I guess I should say this in my update, is that somehow my hard drive went missing, and I think it fell out of my laptop bag, which I discovered a hole in it. But normally I put the hard drive in a side pocket, so maybe I missed the side pocket and maybe it fell out of the hole I discovered in the bag. I'm really upset because there was at least 20 videos, I think at least 14, but I'm thinking actually it was closer to 20 that I'm backlogged on. So if I can't find it, they're all gone. And I've looked and looked and looked everywhere. It also has a lot of my art and other things on there. And I used the hard drive to manage the space on my phone and on my laptop so that my phone doesn't get too crowded, or neither does my laptop, so that way I have more room to make these videos here, and also I have room to produce videos on my laptop because it takes so much space to do that. Anyway, so pray for me to find that. I've been looking everywhere. If not, I guess I just have to start over fresh. It won't be the first time. Anyway, so let me tell you about this art. So this was in response to a therapy session, and I was talking about my broken dreams and some of the things that seem like they get in the way of my dreams. And of course, the therapist is a CBT, a cognitive behavioral therapist. And so in this particular artwork, which also I have a prophetic word for, and this artwork started off actually with jelly prints. And even before I started my jelly prints, I did some mark making, and I was getting out all my anger and frustration and sadness. Not really anger so much, just more frustration and sadness. So I did all that. That's the back of it. But you can't really see those lines much anymore because it turned into a jelly print. And actually, it was a really pretty jelly print. And so I wanted to make my own jelly prints for the art. So there's this one too, which I also mamagami'd. So I was working through, a lot of feelings. And then this one as well. Because, that particular day I wanted to make art, but I also wanted to do jelly printing. So I decided to do both, get out my feelings in the jelly prints, and then incorporate it into the art. So that's what this one is. And then it's got so many interesting shapes and symbols, but it's almost like, I don't want to go too much into depth because I'm going to make a separate video, even if I have to start over and you can't see the process. If I can't find that hard drive, I will make a separate video about this. But I sang to the Lord while I was doing the jelly printing, and then he responded with a prophetic message, and then I made the art, and then he showed me even some more things. So I'm not going to go into all of that, but basically I saw a path going up into, this looked like a little hut, which maybe could represent the throne room. And I was going through almost like a little arch here, almost like a little passageway. And I decided to title it Climbing My Way to the Throne Room Over My Broken Dreams, since I was working through some of the despair and some of the disappointment of things not working out in my life. Okay, that one maybe isn't quite as potentially triggering as this one, though. So this one I actually worked on more military sexual trauma, and I was working on boundaries. I worked on boundaries with this one as well. And well, I guess what could be triggering is that I was working on a particular memory with one of my ex-boyfriends who was sexually abusive to me. And he would get violent sometimes, but he also was very tender. And so we were talking about that dynamic and how I wish that I could have gotten out of this situation. I wish I would have realized I was being damaged as much as I was being damaged, but I didn't realize it. And the therapist was saying how that would confuse anybody. It's easier to recognize abuse if it's just only abuse, but when there's tenderness and kindness and, you know, fun, sometimes it's a little bit harder. And so she said, you know, that was grooming. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that. But in this particular one, as I was creating it, I found some scriptures that said they will rebuild the ancient ruins and renew the ruined cities that have been devastated long ago. That was left over from another project, and I thought that is perfect. And I felt like God was telling me he's rebuilding my life. And, you know, those traumatic memories, he's repairing them and he's healing them. And this was made on November 5th, by the way. And he's rebuilding my life, but there was also all this gold that was ending up in my artwork to represent the repair that he was doing over, you know, my fractured dreams and the fractured part of my life. And these kind of look like windows. So I thought, like, new buildings going up, like my internal landscape, my psyche's being rebuilt, and my mental, you know, mind and my emotions are being rebuilt. My foundation of who I am and how I see the world, how I see God is being rebuilt. But then God also told me, it was interesting, 11/5, you know, it was also the day of the election. God told me he's rebuilding our nation. So I'll make a separate video on this too, even though the one where I'm actually doing it is lost. So let's move into the jelly printing and the decorative paper making that I did. So I had 3 different sessions for the jelly printing / decorative painting, which was on I had 4 different sessions: 10/26, 10/29, November 3rd, and November 5th. So that's it for just the regular artwork. So I'm going to talk about the decorative papers. This one, even though I ripped it, was really fun and really cool. Take a look at that. So this was an oil pastel drawing with Distress Oxide inks, and then I decided to mamagami it. That is just really cool in my opinion. Okay, so this one, I was experimenting with like different textures. So, oh, I didn't tell you the date on this one, did I? So this was the first set. This is 10/26. Okay, this is the first set. So this is the first one on 10/26. This is the second one on 10/26. And I took an old collage that I made and reworked it with, well, I put it on the gel plate, and then I also did some Distress Oxide sprays, and I then put paint on it that I also scratched into. And it's also got oil pastels, acrylics, Distress Oxide sprays. Oh, and I used sandpaper on it as well. So I've been writing these notes on the back of some of my papers to remind me what all I did. I love the texture of this one. This is going to be really cool. Okay, so now we have just a regular jelly print. We're on the same day, which is 10/26. And For this one, afterwards, I put some metallic paint on it. So I used a gold metallic paint for this one. And it's on multi-purpose paper. I forgot to tell you this one. This is just regular watercolor paper. And those trauma journal entries were also made of watercolor paper. So this is multi-purpose paper. This is number 4 of the decorative papers that day. This is pretty much just a regular gel print, but with distress oxide sprays. But what's different about this one is I topped it off with fluorescent pink ink, and I just basically brushed it on. And one thing I do with my gel prints is I don't limit myself to gel printing. Sometimes I like to just take it and add something else, which I just brush on without using the gel plate. Like I brushed on the ink for this, and for this one I brushed on the metallic watercolor paint. I just love that sheen. And sometimes I just do my mark making directly on the paper as well. And so I did a lot of mark making with this particular well, I'm not sure it's this particular series, but in general with my gel prints I do. So this is a new day then. That concludes 10/26. So this is the first of 10/29. So this is pretty much a regular gel print. And I like to do lots of different line work through the stencil so that I have different types of marks, you know, going in different directions versus one pattern, you know, over the whole paper. I kind of like to mix it up. And then of course I like that distress oxide spray. This one doesn't have anything else aside of the acrylic distress oxide sprays. This one also has so many different layers of the stencils, and it also has distress oxide sprays. And this is the second that I made on that day. And I realized, like, if you were to use this in another project and you put something wet over top of it, these distress oxide sprays would be reactivated. So I've been spraying some of these with fixative, and so if I have add fixative to it, I will write a little note so I'll remember, because I will cut this up someday and maybe add it to like a collage pack. So I'm going to be spraying all of these down. So here's another jelly print. This one was more plain as far as the line work goes, but it also has quite a lot of different colors. And I could tell it did have some line work on it, but you can't really see it because I have it covered up so much. And this one was made with glittery fabric paint to the top of it. Yeah, and I actually think I used possibly Sumi ink or acrylic paint. It's covered up so much that it's hard to tell. This one is another gel print with a lot of mark making, but you can't hardly see it because I have it covered up. But it also has lots of layers with stencils, and I sprayed this one with fixative too. And I'm trying to think if it has the paint on it. I don't think it had watercolor paint, but I do think I used the gold acrylic paint for one of the layers. Wasn't the final layer though. And then this one also, this was multimedia paper, and I think this is multimedia paper, but it's hard to tell. It's so stained up and it has so many layers that the texture has changed. But this one is sprayed with fixative, and I also have the glittery fabric paint on top of it, and you can see all the different details because I use so many different stencils and colors of acrylic paint for that one, mostly pinks and blues though. So then this one was a jelly print, but later I took the distress oxide sprays and I sprayed it through this cherry blossom stencil that I have. So I had sort of a gold base, and then I used a purple distress oxide spray. I have 2 shades of purple, so I forget which one this is. And then this one was basically made the same way, but I had a purple base. And I sprayed it with the orange distress oxide sprays, which is Rusty Hinge. That's one of my favorites. And then this was my cleanup paper to clean up my gel plate. And this is brown packaging paper right here. And there's nothing fancy about this one, and I didn't really use stencils or anything. This was just purely cleanup. But I think I put it on the gel plate more than once just to get all of the shape, you know, covered up with some paint. Now we're on to a new day, and this is also where I experimented with the string gel, and also was using some glazes this period too. So this is November 3rd, and this one's has a lot of different layers on it. So this one, golly, let me try to remember here. Started out as oil pastel drawing, which was very layered, and I scratched into this one as well. Maybe this is the one I used the stencils for this graffito effect. And I had so many different layers with this one. Yeah, there were 2 layers with the oil pastels. I think it is this one that I used the stencils with the oil pastels and scratched into it. And then after I did the 2 layers and all these different sections, then I went back over it with a bunch of different collage papers that I had. And then after that, what I did is I experimented with the string gel, which I've only ever used twice before, and I'm not good with the string gel. The first time I used it, I added color and I couldn't get it to do anything. It was so much color, I guess, it just wouldn't go down. It wouldn't like drop when I tried to do it. So that particular time I just used it like sort of like an acrylic medium, you know, it was just thick and gloppy. Then I used it again and I didn't add any color and I could use it just fine. I could drizzle the string gel and make interesting designs, but it kind of just looked like acrylic, not acrylic, but just a regular Elmer's glue. I'm wondering if you could get a similar effect. Maybe you couldn't get such thin lines as you can with the string gel. But this time I thought, okay, I'm going to add some color and try it, but I'm going to add a little less color and like really thin color versus thick acrylic paint. I added acrylic ink. And I pretty much did it pretty well. I could drizzle it onto the paper and I could get these really fine lines. I don't know if you can see the fine lines in there if I turn it different ways, but also some of it was gloppy as well. So some of it went on there, you know, just really thick like this. That's where it was gloppy. So I thought, well, that'll be kind of interesting. And I could have just left it alone, and I actually think it was prettier before I did this final step. But, I mean, I still like it for what I did, because this was shiny, okay? The string gel dries really shiny, and this was matte, the collage underneath the string gel. So I decided to go over it with a shiny, shiny glaze that was like peach color, or pinky peach color. So I put that all over, which of course muted it way down and took some of the contrast away. But I still really like it, not by itself, but what I think it might make that would be nice is maybe a really nice decorative pocket, and I could sew into it. Maybe I could mamagami it with konyaki starch and sew into it. I probably don't even need to do that. I could just sew without doing that. And maybe add some pretty lace or a ribbon like at the top, and I could make a cute little pocket, or maybe start a tag of some sort and add some other embellishments. Might be cute. So it has a lot of potential, you know, once you dress it up, and it's got a really interesting texture and really interesting lines. This one's actually also really cool. We made this on the same day, which is November 3rd. This is made on black craft paper. This, by the way, was just made on regular drawing paper. And what's cool about this one was a lot of oil pastels and acrylic paint that I scratched into. And I scratched it with like a cake scraper in different directions. Oh, and actually before I did all that, it had, it was a black craft paper, and I put white gesso on it, and I used a Caran d'Ache crayons, the #1, and I sort of scribbled a design all over it. And that actually, that part I did a long time ago, and it sat for a long time. And then I just added, well, I put this to the gel plate, added some acrylic paint to it, Then I started scratching into it with that comb. It was really interesting. Oh, and it also has a pink glaze on top of it, which the pink glaze I think works really well on here. I love the texture of it. It's really shiny. And also then on that day, which was November 3rd, I made this jelly print. And this one is more simple. I mean, who knows how many layers, because I do a lot of layers. This one also has Distress Oxide sprays. Pretty much ended up with one stencil though, and the stencil is about that wide. So I had to use it twice, and then I had to find a way to try to kind of blot that line so it wasn't so noticeable. So I just basically took a paper towel and kind of smudged it in the middle there so it looks more cohesive instead of divided. And then I also took metallic watercolors and finished it off with that to make it really shiny. And it's on multi-purpose paper. Yeah, it was a purple metallic watercolor that I used. This one also has a purple metallic watercolor on top of my gel print. Again, it's multi-purpose paper. And then this one has just several layers of color, not as much line work, but I also use metallic watercolors on this, and this was more of a bronze color that I used. And here is where you can see a lot of my mark making. And actually for this one, I think in addition to using Sumi ink and acrylic paint to do my marks, I also used a string to get an impression. And so this one's not necessarily my favorite, but it is really cool. And I finished it off with metallic watercolors. This one also has Sumi ink, which I did a lot of mark making with, and I just painted it on there with the brush, and Distress Oxide inks, and of course just many layers of acrylic paints. And then I finished this one off with the bronze watercolor, metallic watercolor. This one I struggle with, but it's kind of cool. It's got the Sumi ink, which I painted on, and it's got white acrylic paint, which I also painted on, and lots of layers. And I used sort of red and orangey acrylic paints for this one. It's really cool. This one is the first one I experimented with cold wax. So I've never used cold wax before, and I just kind of did my own thing because it's probably odd after I tell you what I did with the cold wax. But this was, okay, just a plain old jelly print, like one layer, I think. And then what I did was I used leftover string gel on it, okay, and it was gloppy, so it wasn't stringy. And because it was so gloppy, I took a comb and I combed through the string gel, so basically it just created texture. And also then I added oil pastels to it. I melted the oil pastels with a heat gun. All right. And then, and I pretty much did sort of like a scribble design, mostly just a random mark making as well. And then after that, I went back over with cold wax. Now, I'm new to cold wax, but in my research with the cold wax, I learned that I don't think you can go back over this with acrylic paint. Rather, you have to use something oil-based like oil paint or oil sticks, or maybe more oil pastels. I do a lot of work with oil pastels, so I can probably keep this in my own personal collection and collage with it, but then put the oil pastels over top of it. I might just try acrylic paints just to see what it does, but I'm told really you're not supposed to use it with that. But it's got a cool feel to it. Also with the cold wax, you could put it in your journal to keep your pages from sticking together, but I'll be honest, it's a little bit pricey for using it for that purpose, when you could just use cellulose glue, and that would keep your pages from sticking together, and it's more economical. So also, this is another gel print on awagami paper. So I did 2 gel prints on awagami paper, and also did a lot of mark making with a purple metallic marker, not metallic, just a purple marker, and then also some white paint. And this one has Distress Oxide sprays. Yeah, but it's not coated with anything else. That one's really pretty, I think. This one also is origami paper. I used lots of stencils as well, and also Distress Oxide sprays. Oh, and this one is finished with metallic watercolors. Yeah, this one has it. This one, you're going to think this one is weird. I'm not afraid to take risks and try things differently. Okay, so but it's cool. All right, so one layer of gel print, which is purple. And then what I did is I took, I think it was, yeah, oil pastels. And I did sort of like a scribble design with the oil pastels. Then what I did is I used the embossing powder on it. So I took the Versa embossing ink, okay, and I put it through a stencil and rubbed that design on there, and then I sprinkled this pink glittery embossing powder. And I don't do a lot of embossing powder work, so I'm sort of new to it. Used my heat gun on it, got it glittery and really shiny. It was really pretty, but then I think, well, you should have left it alone. But then I put the cold wax. That's the weird part. I put the cold wax on top of it just to see what would happen. And so it is really cool. And I think it kind of seals in that glitter just a little bit, even though it seems a little odd to put the cold wax over the glitter. It did change the shininess of it just a little bit, but I think it's kind of cool. All right, so then I also made one of watercolor paper that was also very textured, and this was an old collage that I put on the gel plate. Basically ended up with sort of reddish orangish background. And then what I did is I put crackle paste all over it, and I can't remember if it was leftover crackle paste or if I just got out fresh crackle paste and put it on. But then I experimented with spraying the crackle paste with some blue Distress Oxide inks. So there you have that. There's not a whole lot of cracks in the crackle paste, so maybe the Distress Oxide sprays take some of that away, or maybe it depends on how thick you make it. I did let it air dry, because I think I heard you're not supposed to use a blow dryer or heat gun with the crackle paste, or it won't crack as much. But it's got a really cool texture to it. Okay, so that concludes all the artwork from November 3rd. Now, I have one more day of gel printing. This is pretty much just a ghost print, just a clean up paper. Not all of the paper from the gel plate was able to get something on it. So what I had to do was paint on the paper itself on these little edges because there wasn't paint on there, and then I sprayed it also with Distress Oxide sprays on the edges too to make it match the middle a little bit. Maybe you can tell a little bit how I painted those corners. And I mean, it's kind of plain, but I think it'll be cool for, like, you know, as collage fodder. And then this one's kind of pretty too. Oh, by the way, this is cardstock. This is white cardstock. And this is also white cardstock. And this is just a gel print. And for this one, though, I also ended it, or topped it off with pink fluorescent acrylic ink. And then I used saran wrap, and I put it on top of it to get some crinkles in there. And I just let it sit overnight and removed the saran wrap the next morning. So there you have all of my artwork that I did this period. And even though I've been so busy and I work, you know, full time, I still try to make time for my art. And the art making is how I manage my emotions and de-stress. I've had quite a lot of stress this past time period, this past, you know, 12 days, including, you know, some, you could say, like a big loss in my family that I'm trying to work through. And then, of course, losing my hard drive was also a pretty big loss. So I feel, you could say I felt a little discombobulated between all of those things happening. I think I'm managing okay. You know how it is when you go through something. You have good days and bad days. Right now, feel like I'm doing a little bit better, and I have seen the grace of God in my circumstances, even though I'm going through a loss of sorts, and I don't want to go into the details. I've seen the provision of God, and I've seen how He's done little things to show me that He's there for me, that He loves me, that He's taking care of me, taking care of my family. And that means the world to me. And that, just knowing God is there and sort of softening the blow a little bit, that really goes a long way to, helping you get through a difficult situation. So I hope you were inspired by my artwork and encouraged. I hope something I said maybe touched you or stirred interest in you to maybe try and experiment. I do like to experiment quite a bit in my art. I think it's fun. Obviously, I love making decorative papers. I love making collages. Most of my art is really just to manage my emotions. But I think one day all this art making and mark making is going to lend itself to making something, maybe really beautiful. I do bigger artworks too sometimes. I just haven't really felt, you could say, inspired lately to do that. And I already have so many works that aren't finished yet. So lately I've just mainly been focusing on trauma journal work and decorative papers. But at some point in time I have to get back to some of my other unfinished work, and maybe at some point in time I will show you that. Be blessed, everybody. Bye.